most important relationships is our relationships in our marriages or with our significant others. And so we're going to have a conversation, and you're going to have an opportunity to see a couple that really has an epic relationship and who's worked to create that, and we're going to have like a super authentic conversation. So ladies and gentlemen, will you stand on your feet and welcome Chris and Kalen Crone. So this is going to be a really informal conversation. We just really want to open up our hearts, and how many of you have experienced friction or challenge or stress in your relationship? Right? Like we almost laugh about that question because it's part of relationships, right? And I get interviewed a lot about relationships. I'm kind of, I had this really interesting experience. For those that don't know my story, I was married for 16 years, went through divorce. After I was divorced, I was like, oh my gosh, what did I learn? What can I do better? I ended up writing this post on Facebook that got shared by tens of millions of people. I was on the Today Show, ended up writing a book about the marriage advice I wish I would have had. Because unlike Chris and Kalen, I feel like I learned the lessons too late, right? I feel like I didn't know how to create what they've been able to create, and it's really like relationships are the catalyst for massive growth and transformation. But it's really hard when we're in the midst of those relationships to figure them out and to understand all the different triggers that affect us. So let's just dive into some like real world questions. So for you guys, what's the greatest challenge you've had to deal with in your marriage? Kalen?
Oh.
We're going to dive right into it.
I was sitting in the back when you were bringing up our 4 awesome standards of personalities. And when you mentioned 2s getting smashed by 3s, like healers getting smashed by warriors, I was like, yeah. Here we got a healer married to a warrior. And before we understood that, there was a lot of me feeling insecure and feeling not good enough and feeling like, because, you know, I wanted to please, but because I wasn't as warrior, because I felt as strong, then I was bad and I wasn't as good and I wasn't as worthy, and there was a lot of struggle, but it wasn't really struggle between us, because that was the symptom. It was a struggle in myself and actually taking power over my own person, my own ability to stand up and say, I know who I am, and it's a healer, and it's good, and it's beautiful, and it's not a warrior. And that's okay, and that's actually good. And when we figured that out, Chris said to me, I'm so glad I'm not married to me. He doesn't want to be married to himself. Like, that'd be weird.
That would be weird. Yeah,
I did want that for about 10 years, and it didn't work.
And then he appreciated that I am completely different.
Yeah.
And that's good.
Yeah. Beautiful. So, Chris, I know that you and Kalen went through this time where you were doubting that your relationship was going to work. You were considering, whether or not to continue or not, and even the thought of divorce was there. Like, take us to that moment, and like, what for you do you feel like created that, and kind of express like the pain that you were in at that time, and how you created that.
So I have 2 wonderful parents that were both, they could really do battle very, very well. They could both be loud. They would both externalize. Klen would just shut down. Klen would go doormat. So there was no one ever to fight. And so I would fight her with words, and I would use all of these words on her. And my big problem was that I wanted her to change. Like, in this weird, strange, naive mind of mine, I didn't like how infrequent the laundry was done. I didn't like how the clothes were put away, or rather just strewn on the ground. I didn't like how part of the house was kept. There were things that we would fight and argue about, and as petty and small as those were, man, they consumed me because it was so important for me to control that aspect. And so I kept trying to use my words to see if I could persuade or convince Glenn to change. And it didn't matter how many words I used. And it didn't matter how blue in the face I was or how many conversations. But after 10 years, it basically hit this point where it wasn't just clothes, it was the conversation of intimacy and the lack of communication and situation, problems there, that it really kind of boiled to a head where I just kind of finally said, I am so sick and tired of like the same stupid conversation that gets zero traction.
The worst thing you can do to Chris Crone is ignore him. And because my coping mechanism was shut down, it looked like ignoring, and that was not good.
Never ignore me. So, Gerald, for me, it was a really painful place. It was the most painful, now I reflect on it as one of the most beautiful parts of our marriage, because that was like a time where we were basically choosing to create something almost brand new, because what was old it wasn't working.
Yeah, and I want you all to tune into this. Like there comes a point where we have to realize that the old relationship we used to have is dead. And like every day is an opportunity to create a new relationship, to renew and to choose something new. Because oftentimes we create these little boxes based on all of the pain that we've experienced in the past, and we try to keep our spouses in that box. We try to define them, this is who you are. But in order to allow something new to be created, we need to discard those boxes and say, all right, well, let's start new. Like, what do we want to create? So for you...
Can I just say something real quick?
Yeah.
I don't think you've done it yet today, but there was, I think it was at the Live Big, you had written on the board about relationships, how they start, and you're in such love and infatuation, and just like, you don't see anyone's faults, and then you slowly grow apart as life hits you, and at some point there is an actual re-decision of, do I really choose in now that things have happened? Do you remember doing that?
Yeah.
I really appreciated that, because it seems like most relationships need to have that second choose in. Yeah. At some point you will hit it.
And then the third, and then the fourth.
And hopefully when you reach those points, it's make it or break it. It's either going to work or it's going to fall apart. And that's the critical moment when you need to really, really decide. Are you going to choose all in and be unconditional, or are you going to let it destroy it?
Yeah. So you guys made this powerful decision to recommit, to re-engage, essentially to remarry each other, in that, and to allow a new relationship, and to both take accountability for your own parts, which is critical in a relationship, to realize, oh wow, this is my relationship. That means I get to play 100%, no matter what the other person does. And you've been able to create what I view, my experience, and I've spent a lot of time with both of you, like I view your relationship as really an epic marriage that works. So for you, what does an epic marriage look like? What are you striving to create? What does that look like for you, Glenn?
It's trusting that we care enough about each other to really make the other person's needs a priority. I had an issue with selfishness, and if my needs were not being met, I didn't want to help him with his needs. And when I let go of that ego and trusted that he would take care of me as I would take care of him, that's what worked.
That's beautiful.
Yeah, it's limitless is code word for one of my favorite words. It is, to me, the most powerful energy that I've ever experienced, which is unconditional. And it says, and this was really the moment that changed our marriage, and I'll never forget it, it was the choice that you can never go back from, or else it will have only been conditional. And the idea was, I'm gonna love this woman when she is absolutely at her best. And I am going to love this woman when she is absolutely not. And whatever kind of day she's having, whatever circumstances happen in her life when she is absolutely adorable and lovable, or whether she is having maybe one of the most trying times in her life, whether she shows up as a beast, which she really doesn't do, but however she shows up, that I'm going to show up for her, and I'm committed to love her no matter what kind of day she's having. In other words, I'm not going to make my love conditioned based on how she's showing up.
It's also good to be able to recognize when their energy is, okay, so if things are going on in his life and he is being triggered and he's in my presence, and his anger or frustration is coming towards me, it's not really that he's angry at me. It's just I'm the one in his vicinity, and I can step into a role of a coach, a loving spouse that can just have the shield up and be able to facilitate what's actually going on, and let's work on this. And once I figured that out, that was a really helpful trick, because then it wasn't, shut down, he's mad, therefore he's mad at me.
Yeah, and this is what happens in relationships a lot, is we always personalize everything. If our spouse is mad, we like, oh my gosh, I'm a failure, I'm not good enough. And for us guys, like one of the most common stories that we run in the back of our mind is, no matter how hard I try, it's not enough. Any guys relate to this? Right? No matter how hard I try, it's never enough, because we somehow are taking responsibility for her happiness. And if she's unhappy in any way, we feel like, oh my gosh, I'm trying to do everything, and it's not enough. And then for women who are craving the sense of validation and appreciation and feeling like they're the priority and they're most important, if their spouse isn't meeting her rules, right, her expectations for him, then she feels like, oh my gosh, I can't be loved, I'm not worthy, I'm not lovable. And so all of these internal wounds are being triggered just because we're creating stories, we're personalizing whatever is happening. But just like Glenn says, being able to, create a different story. He's angry, that doesn't mean that he's mad at me or that I'm not good enough. That just means he's in a moment where he needs support, right? He needs love, he needs me to show up. And this is really important, especially for you guys, because one of the most common patterns, and you've probably seen it in your relationship, and I think every relationship experiences this, where the woman might get frustrated or get angry, and she needs to express something, right? Like women, you're communicators. You need to express like what's going on. You need to address it. And for guys, we gain value by believing that we're the hero, right? We want to be respected, and so we need to create this belief that everything's okay. And so guys are really good at avoiding the challenge or the problem that's there. And then the woman comes expressing whatever she's feeling, whatever emotion is there at the moment, because the feminine is all about emotion. And the guy, when he's listening to it, he's hearing, oh my gosh, I'm not enough, I'm not good enough. And so the masculine, the unconscious masculine's response is to either shut down and say, oh my gosh, they disconnect and retreat to their little man cave, or to fight back and to try to defend themselves, or to try to fix the problem, right? You guys relate to this? Like, this is our response, and that's not what the woman's wanting at all, right? The woman is wanting what? The woman's wanting to be heard, to be validated, to be understood, right? She's not asking him to fix it. She certainly doesn't want him to run away. But the man needs to consciously decide, wow, I'm going to be present no matter how you're showing up, because I love you. And I'm going to listen, and I'm going to validate that.